as marketers, it's easy to talk about yourself. It's easy to toot your own horn, but we are becoming very cynical. And I think we are really wanting to hear from our peers and our colleagues about their experience and their recommendations. Real human stories are what we all gravitate towards, and customer stories are no different.
Welcome to another episode of The State of Customer Storytelling. My guest today is Emily Amos. She is the founder at Uplift Content. Uplift Content is a boutique B2B SaaS content creation studio that has a track record of success with high-growth companies like Okta, LeanData, and On24, and many others. In particular, one of their specialties is using the voice of the customer close bigger deals faster with done-for-you case studies. And in addition, they also support a ton of B2B companies with eBooks, white papers, and a really robust selection of other types of content as well. Emily, excited to have you on today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
Absolutely. And so let's just dive right in. I mean, let's talk about why customer stories matter today. Yeah, I'd love to, and I obviously have some, this is something I'm passionate about as well, but, to kick things off, why do customer stories, matter today, in your opinion, maybe more than ever before?
I think that customer stories have always been important, but I think now, because we're all hiding behind computer screens, it's that much more important to put a face and a job title and a company name in front of prospective customers so that they know that this social proof is coming from a real person. As marketers, it's easy to talk about yourself. It's easy to toot your own horn, but we are becoming very cynical. And I think we are really wanting to hear from our peers and our colleagues about their experience and their recommendations. And customer stories really are all of that. They're taking technical information and bringing in that human element that we all want. Real human stories are what we all gravitate towards, and customer stories are no different.
So true. And then also, I think combining the fact that, buyers and prospects are doing so much of their own research, on their own these days, right? It's like, I forget the stat, but it's something like 80% of, the research, buyers want to self-serve, right? And I think in the old days, we sort of saw people didn't need maybe as much customer story content for social proof because the sales process was different. And, people had more time. They could, they weren't as distracted. Maybe they didn't have as many competing attention, things. And because of that, they, I think a lot of companies could sort of rely on just one-to-one conversations and being persuasive, right? And, a good salesperson can do a lot with that, right? But now, it's not slowing down. It's people are going to self-serve and they're going to progress, so much further in the buying cycle, and yeah, I think it's a big shift in the way people buy and the way they want to consume. And
it's huge. I mean, when was the last time you answered your phone, Sam, for a number that you didn't recognize?
Never.
And when was the last time you called a contact us number? So you're interested in a product and you went to the contact us page and actually called the number. I can't even think of a time that I've done that, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, for me, and I think a lot of people feel this way, it's they're just not even going to engage, with a brand unless there's enough of that social proof there to prove it's worth their time, right?
We want to do it on our own terms. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to dictate the selling process. I want to dictate it and therefore I need to be driving the bus.
Hmm.
So this is what I want to do. I want to go on the website. I want to see social proof, whether it's reviews or case studies or other forms of customer stories. I need that reassurance from others that this is legit and it's helpful and it's going to potentially solve my problem.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that that's a great point to make, is that like the buyer journey is changing. People are doing more self-serving. So therefore, as B2B marketers, if we want to stay ahead of the game, we need more customer content. We need more robust customer content. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the different mediums within Option, the different, formats and mediums for customer stories, right? So, I think the big three being, written case studies, third party, reviews on, various review sites, G2, Trust Radius, et cetera. And then, customer videos and, video content, video testimonials being the third of the big three. Yeah. How do you sort of see, and you've worked with a lot of companies, you've now produced a lot of, especially written case studies. I'm curious, how do you sort of see the interplay between all these kind of different mediums and how do you think about that?
I found it interesting that you brought up third-party reviews as one of the top three, because honestly, I don't really think about those. That being said, I do realize they are very important. They just don't come into my world in a big way. Video customer stories for sure, written stories for sure. And I guess I would further break down the written into sales slides, for example. So taking a case study story, with that story, you can do a long form story written, you can do a video, you can do various lengths of video, just as you can do various lengths of written stories. And then, of course, there's sales slides, there's social, so creating little posts to promote full case studies, or even just little snippets that might just be a testimonial, for example, or some other result that you can highlight. So there are so many different, I think what I love most about customer stories is that they're so adaptable and so flexible, and you can really be creative with them.
It's such a good point. And the other word that comes to mind is like extensible, right? The more, I think we're all under more of a requirement to just do more with the content we have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any tips you hit on a couple of really good ones there. Like, I think breaking your case studies, using, creating, their sales slides, maybe their social post. Any other tips you have for people out there who want to, for marketers out there who want to produce more of that customer driven micro content?
I've seen a couple customers, not my customers, but other companies, I should say, that are doing some cool infographics with case studies. And that's something I'd like to dive into a bit more with my customers. And that is, taking the big story and distilling it into something more visual and being able to really pull out those key points. And let me tell you, it's much easier to tell a long story than a short story. I'm sure you know that from video too. It's hard to be able to select those maybe 2 or 3 key points to tell a story in 3 sentences. It's way easier to tell it in 2,000 words, let me tell you. But I really love that idea of knowing that we all learn and absorb information in different ways. It's really important for us as marketers to provide our messaging in different ways as well. I'm curious, Sam, for you, what you're finding, what you're seeing out there that's interesting for you that you would want to explore a bit more.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, we all learn in different ways. And I think at different times, we consume in different ways, right? And it's like, there's so many benefits to video if you have the time to sit down and watch it and listen to it, right? But sometimes, you just, that sort of like, that's just the image with a great pull quote or like a case study is more skimmable than a video, right? So yeah, I think that and now, we're all on our phone often, and work remote environment is a little chaotic. And so, yeah, I think it's more important than ever to give people the options, to your point, to, consume, customer stories in the format that works best for them. And so what I've seen, it's definitely even more of a focus on micro content, like we've been talking about. And also not just, one size fits all micro content, but also taking a more sort of nuanced approach and sort of, mapping out the whole kind of buyer journey, and then saying, okay, here's the customer. Here are the, the common questions, fears, or doubts that we get at this stage. What should the corresponding customer content be for that stage? And then moving on to the next stage in the buyer journey, a little bit further down the funnel, like basically doing the same thing. So that to me, I think is a big, it's basically just taking, marketing and sales enablement best practices, but actually applying them through the lens of customer stories, which I think is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Because early on, if you hit someone, if you share, people aren't, if people don't kind of know that they have the problem, like they're just not going to, have the attention to sit through that, in-depth video or in-depth written case study, right? You sort of have to figure out.
Yeah, it's just not relevant at that point, right?
Exactly. And so it's like, but there still could be a soundbite or a quote that will be relevant. So I think that's what it's all about, is kind of like mapping the buyer journey and then making use of everything you have, as it pertains to that customer story, making the most out of it.
I love that. And I have never really thought about it in that way. And I'm curious, when you're filming a video case study, are you thinking about those stages, and are you crafting questions specifically for those different stages?
So yes, if our clients are also bought into, taking that more nuanced approach, I think for a lot of people, they might not be there yet. They just need to kind of check the box on like their first video testimonial in industry X, right? They
for sure.
So I think with our more kind of clients that we've been working with longer, absolutely. With some of our newer clients, they're okay to just like, be like, that sounds cool. We're not there yet in terms of the maturity of our, customer story program. But so yeah, it does. It depends a little bit.
I would love to ask you, Sam, what you feel is the interplay between the written story and the video story, and how they should be working together and how they should be displayed and dished up to audiences.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it's possible to do both in like one swoop. So I think that is like, from a purely practical perspective, anyone who's thinking about creating a written case study should also be thinking about a video version, and vice versa. Like anyone thinking about a video testimonial should also be thinking about, the written case study. So that would be the first thing. As far as is the interplay, I think a lot of it kind of comes down to kind of design and like implementation. And I do see like more kind of tools coming out to like, I think Path Factor is one of them, but like that are creating a more interactive experience and for, content. And I think like that is, for sure, a lot of companies are just doing that on their website, but I think that like the more kind of interactive you can make it, like I think that's going to be a win, and it's just going to be more engaging. Also, I think another key thing is, having it in multiple situations. So you have like having and this kind of ties back to what we talked about with the buyer journey, is like, so you have the base case, which is like the main video and the full written case study. And then maybe you have on your customer's page, you have the video, and then like a paragraph of the case study. And then they can, if they want to, view the full length case study, then they can click into that. And so for me, it's all about like the main principle is just letting people self-consume in the way that they want to, and having a good user experience where they can go deeper into any area if they want, but balancing that with like not throwing too much information, too much text at them at once, but at the same time inviting them to, always go deeper into the story. Yeah, that's really how I think about it.
So are you saying that you see the written story as the more detailed version, and the video is the higher level, really human, personal touch to the story?
So yes, however, I think in a perfect world, even our customers, for example, they're not just, a lot of them are not creating just one video. So they have like they're creating also deep dives. So like there might be the one 90-second overview video, but then there's maybe 3 60-second videos that are extremely detailed. Those would be more topical, and people aren't going to watch them first probably, but they might want to progress into that. So I think traditionally, yes, I think because also with text, one of the great things about text is you can kind of skim it, scroll through it, go up and down, do that. With video, you can't quite do that the same way. So Therefore, I'm especially big on video around like having it be more snackable. If you're gonna, it's better to have 5 different videos of 60 to 90 seconds than it is to have one 5 to 7 minute video.
That's cool. And so how do you tie the 4 videos together? How do you help the viewer or user understand what they're going to get in each and which one they should choose?
So great question. It comes down ultimately to aligning on, the priorities of their business and their marketing initiatives. So, and also what is the most priority for their sales team. So just for example, maybe it's, the priority is actually, first of all, and then that actually often starts with like doing a gap analysis of like what's missing. So maybe, we determine that, they want to move into a certain industry, move up market into industry X, but they don't have really, there's a gap around like the customer stories that they have to support that priority, and they need more. And then the question is, okay, so then we've kind of identified, well, the persona that we want to capture. And then the question is, well, what are the QFDs, the questions, fears, and doubts that the buyers and the prospects will have that the sales team is going to have to overcome? So with that in mind, then we kind of can work backwards and say like, let's make, the main video to kind of, tell the overall story, general purpose, 60 to 90 to 120 seconds. And then let's make a 60-second objection crusher video, or maybe 3 60-second objection crusher videos, and we use that term. Basically, like an objection crusher for us is like any sort of video, typically around like 60 seconds, that like specifically addresses or relates to like a really common question, fear, or doubt. So at the end of the day, it's really all about, reverse engineering, knowing the problem that we want to solve for, and then, reverse engineering it to kind of fill those gaps.
I love that. And so where do those, what did you call them? Objection crushers? Yeah. Where do those live?
So often those are just used, by individual sales reps in email. Okay. However, also could be like an FAQ page. So like a lot of people have an FAQ page. Every one of your, FAQs, or not every one of them, but many of them could be supported by a customer answering that FAQ, right?
Yeah, I love that. Love that. That's very cool. So So those are not attached in any way to the customer story. They are separate pieces.
Correct. And I mean, they could be, in a sense, like if you built out a page and it had all 5 videos on it and the case study, and it was like a really cool deep dive into this, that specific customer. So they certainly could be on the same page, but definitely a different video. And yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So I know you've asked a lot of interview questions, right? What have you learned? Any tips that you could share for, marketers who are listening to this, and, maybe they have to write some interview questions. Maybe they have to conduct an interview. Maybe they're looking for a partner to do it for them. But either way, they don't really know the keys. What kind of tips could you share around just that important process of interviewing your customers? Because similar to us, I mean, it's kind of this situation where like, good questions get good answers. And like the reverse is also true. It's like, if you don't ask good questions, you're not going to, get as good content. So there's questions. It's all about the questions that you ask.
For sure. 100%. So I would say, first of all, do your homework. Make sure that you have some sort of creative brief or writer's brief or whatever you want to call it from the customer. I know we all have our different documentation, but essentially what we want to know before we write the questions are, do you being our customer, do you have a specific angle in mind that you want us to focus on? Is there a specific product or service that maybe it's a new product or service that you've just launched and you don't currently have any case studies on that new service or product? So do you want us to focus in on that, for example? Is it a new industry? Is it a new use case? Is it a new size of company? So any detail around that is really helpful to know so that we can put more or less emphasis on certain things in order to pull out angles for the story. And then when we go to create the questions themselves, they really need to be focused around the ultimate outcome of the story. So there's a fairly standard, what's the word? I'm missing the word, structure. There's a fairly standard structure for case studies, and that is there's some sort of background or intro. Then you go into the problem or challenge. Then there's the solution where you get to talk about the products or services that our customer provides to solve the problem. And then there's a results section where you get to use concrete numbers and really give some hard evidence for how this really impacted the customer. And there's another section, which is a section that I like to include, and that's the forward-looking or the future section, where you have the opportunity to talk about whether the customer plans on expanding their use of this software, for example, whether a new team within the organization is going to implement it, whether more employees will start using it, things like that, where it's that added social proof of, yeah, we like it today and we like it for this particular use case, but we like it so much that we're going to expand our use of it in some way. And that's a really nice piece to be able to add at the end. So to circle back to the questions, you need to make sure that those questions relate to each of those sections. I mean, I think we all have our standard list, and it's a list that you probably develop over the years. I don't know what you would say, Sam. I mean, I think that you tweak them as you go. You hear a question from somebody else and you're like, ooh, that's a really good one. You add it to your list. But ultimately, you don't want 1,000 questions. You need to make sure you probably only have, 15 or so. So you do need to be quite specific and clear on what you're trying to elicit. And I think the other piece there is this is a conversation. So you can ask the question. And if you're not getting the kind of information you want, that's then your job to hop in and guide them towards giving you the answer that you need. The other piece I would add there is just to be friendly and make them feel at ease and comfortable so that they're willing to share. And I think part of that is also knowing that they get to review it before it gets published. So they don't have to worry if they said something that wasn't quite the way that they would like it in print. They do have the opportunity to fix it or tweak it before it gets published.
Yeah, it's true. It's not only about the right questions, but it's about the overall vibe, and that's going to affect the answers too. So that is just making them feel comfortable, and everything that goes into that is such a good point as well.
And I would say for video, it's even more important, that comfortableness. I mean, before we started recording, I told you I was nervous, and I think video brings out the nerves, right? And much more so than a phone interview.
It's true. Although I think due to the pandemic, we've all, I think, had to spend more time on Zoom and on video calls. So I think people are becoming slightly more comfortable, right, than maybe 2 years ago. But for sure, without a doubt, it's definitely, there's a need to spend the extra time and make sure the customer is comfortable. And I think I love the point that you brought up around asking the customer about the angle, or making sure that because that is it's such a simple thing, but involving the customer and saying hey, this is what I had in mind, but what do you have in mind, right? And just giving them an opportunity to co-create and collaborate and have their voice in the creation process makes them feel way more bought in, but also can really take you to new areas of content that are amazing that you never would have thought of too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this ties in directly with the overarching case study strategy. And sometimes as writers, we're not involved in that strategy, though we would always love to be. But by asking about the angle, that helps us have that discussion around strategy and which stories we should be telling. And so if we don't already know which stories we're aiming to tell, this allows us to ask, why are we telling this particular story? Why have you chosen this customer to highlight?
For sure. And one thing that I always like to hit on this podcast is future trends and where do we see things going. I know we've talked a little bit about that, but specifically for you in kind of your business and written case studies, what trends have you seen over the past, couple years? I'd love, and where do you see things going? I'd love to hear, more about that as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And when I think about all of the case studies, I mean, I keep my eye open, I'm sure you do too, at what people are producing in our industry. Honestly, I can't see any particular trends. I feel like it's still very varied in that there's long ones, there's short ones. People are still doing PDFs sometimes. They're doing, little micros. They're maybe just choosing to do video, or they're just choosing to do written. I don't have a good answer for you on the future trends. I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think, specifically for written, one trend I think is maybe more original photography and or higher quality visuals. For example, we've had some, instances where we actually, obviously our main business is video creation, but, we have also done photo shoots in both to support, a written case study. And also, we've had at least one instance where we just did a photo shoot and we didn't even do a video shoot. It was just the photo shoot, original photos for the written case study that the client was producing internally. And so just the prominence and the requirement for more and higher quality visuals within the written medium as well. And original photography, just setting the bar higher, I think that's definitely one thing I think is going to continue.
Yeah. And along with that, I'm glad you brought that up. Along with that is better designed templates. we've all seen the big wall of text, and part of our job as writers is to make sure it's not just a wall of text by adding headers and subheaders and bulleted lists and various chunks and components. But ultimately, without a great design, it's still going to fall flat. So it's so important to get design right and be constantly looking at it. How can we improve this design to make the numbers pop, make it more interesting and engaging to go through? I mean, none of us have time. If we see a big wall of text, nobody wants to read that. We need to make it interesting and fun and engaging. So we need color, we need design, we need photos. We need all of that to work in tandem with the text.
Incredibly powerful point. And I think even 5 years ago, like web design, especially like wasn't quite as important for B2B as it is now, right? It's no longer like a nice to have. It's absolutely like a need to have. And because, like you said, it's like there's so many things, so much, so many competing things for our attention, and like to hold our attention, it's like the bar has just been set higher from a design perspective in every situation.
And it speaks to credibility too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking about doing business with a company, first impressions matter. And if it doesn't look good, what does that say about your product? What does that say about your customer service? What does that say about ultimately how much you care? So it really is important.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. First impressions matter. And that's actually something that, pertaining to video quality and like the quality of video testimonials, that's something that I get asked a lot, is like, well, like, why do my video testimonials need to be high quality? I thought like everyone was super happy. I thought authenticity was like the rage, and like I could just, record my Zoom meeting. And honestly, like there's nothing like inherently wrong with that, but first impressions do matter. So if you want to use the video in a first impressions situation, like on your homepage, it's like, do you really want to put something that's like cheap and cheerful on your homepage alongside the rest of, what you have there? Maybe not, so it's like, I think there's definitely like a time for cheap and cheerful, but it's not often, to set the right first impression, like you do need, a level of polish. And also, I think this is something that I could go on about for, at length, but it's that high quality and authenticity do not have to be mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, and this goes for writing, design, and video, I think a lot of people think, oh, like if I go the high quality route, like that's not as authentic. And like, well, that's not actually the case, because like what else? There's other things that influence authenticity in video. It's things such as like, well, are you asking questions in a way that get people to, actually give genuine answers? And like, are you asking questions at all, first of all? Because some people would script their videos, and that, like, no way, like that's not going to be authentic at all. So yeah, I think that is something that I'm very passionate about, is this idea that, like, if we're being honest, like authenticity and quality do not have to be like mutually exclusive concepts.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We need to be showing our best. What's the expression? Put your best foot forward. I don't know. I like, It has to be the very best. There's so many other options. We're all just analyzing our options and saying, oh no, not that one, not that one. Why? Oh, well, they had a typo on their homepage. I'm not doing business with them. I mean, literally, we're looking for excuses to disqualify options.
It's so true. It's like, I mean, that's kind of like, we're all, the way that our brains work as buyers is, we're looking for that like shortcut, right? And like a shortcut is often like making a snap judgment around like, is this, credible? Does this have the social proof? So I think that's a great point, and that takes us right back to where we started, I think, which is like why customer stories matter more than ever. Emily, this has been fantastic. For our listeners, how can people get in touch with you and your Uplift if they want to connect or learn more?
I would love for you to reach out through LinkedIn. My name is Emily Amos. Amos is Amos. Also, you can find us at Uplift Content on LinkedIn, and then our website is upliftcontent.com.
Fantastic. I definitely recommend everyone connect with Emily. She shares a lot of great tips around customer stories and case studies. And thanks again, Emily. This was an absolute pleasure.
It was great to be here. Thank you, Sam.
Alrighty, folks. That was another episode of the State of Customer Storytelling. Awesome episode with Emily Amos. A couple of the things I really want to underscore there: breaking up your customer stories into all this different micro content, right? If you have a case study, are you using it for your sales slides? Are you using it for social posts, infographics? How can, just challenging yourself to do more with what you have, and the fact that we all learn in different ways. So, you're going to want, different formats for your customer stories. We talked a lot about the buyer journey and the nuances of customer storytelling throughout the buyer journey. And Emily flipped it over to me for a little bit. And, hopefully that was some good, insight as well for folks. And then we talked about interview tips and trends, and then first impressions matter and the need to get that first impression right, and that quality and authenticity aren't mutually exclusive. All right. Well, if you have any other guests that you'd like to have on the show, just shoot me an email. It's sam@testimonialhero.com. We'd love to hear from you. We always love suggestions on the show. And until then, we'll see you in the next episode. This has been, as always, the State of Customer Storytelling.